Three thugs bullied a pregnant woman outside a diner, grabbing her purse and mocking her belly. She didn't scream or beg, just smiled calmly and said, "You really don't want to do that." What they didn't know, she was the Mafia boss's wife, and he'd burn the city down for her. Clara Rossi knew three things for certain that Tuesday afternoon. Her ankles were swollen, her back ached like hell, and the baby inside her had decided her bladder was a trampoline. 8 months pregnant, and she still had to drive herself to doctor's appointments because Matteo, her overprotective, infuriatingly cautious husband, was stuck in back-to-back meetings at his import business. She pulled her silver Honda into the gravel parking lot of Mel's Highway Diner, a rundown spot 30 miles outside Chicago that served the best pastrami sandwiches this side of the interstate. The ultrasound pictures crinkled in her purse as she stepped out, one hand supporting her belly, the other shielding her eyes from the afternoon sun. The diner looked the same as always, faded red paint, flickering neon sign, and the smell of coffee and grease that hit you before you even opened the door. Clara loved it here. It was simple, normal, the kind of place where nobody knew her last name meant something dangerous. She slid into a corner booth, ordered her usual, and pulled out the ultrasound photos.
A boy.
They were having a boy. Matteo had cried when the technician told them, actual tears streaming down the face of a man who once broke a loan shark's legs with a tire iron. That was 5 years ago, before he walked away from the Rossi crime family, before he promised her a different life. "Hey there, Mama." Clara looked up. 3 men stood by her booth, bikers from the look of their worn leather vests and oil-stained jeans. The one who'd spoken had a patchy beard and bourbon on his breath. His friends flanked him, grinning like jackals who'd found wounded prey. "Can I help you?" Clara kept her voice level, her face neutral. She'd learned long ago that showing fear was like blood in the water. "You sure can," patchy beard slurred. "See, my buddies and I got a bet going. I say you're having twins. Maybe triplets. You're eating for a whole football team in there." His friends erupted in laughter. The few other diners glanced over, then quickly looked away. Nobody wanted trouble. Clara set down her photos carefully. "You should probably go sit down. Your food's getting cold." "Nah, I don't think so." The biker leaned closer, his hand gripping the edge of her table. "I think you're gonna buy us a round of drinks first. For the entertainment." "Entertainment?" Clara raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, we've been watching you waddle in here. Better than TV." He reached out and flicked one of her ultrasound pictures. "Bet your man doesn't even stick around once that thing pops out. Who wants used goods?" Something cold settled in Clara's chest, not fear, but calculation. She recognized the type. Bullies who got brave when they were drunk and the target looked vulnerable. They had no idea who they were messing with. "Last chance," she said quietly. "Walk away." The biker's grin widened. Then his hand shot out and grabbed her purse. Clara's fingers instinctively tightened, but he yanked hard, pulling it from the booth. Her phone, her wallet, Matteo's emergency credit card he'd given her. All of it in that bag. "Hey!" The waitress called from behind the counter, but nobody moved to help. "You really don't want to do that," Clara said, her voice calm despite her racing heart. She started to slide from the booth, but her belly made her clumsy. Vulnerable. The bikers laughed harder. Patchy Beard dangled her purse like a trophy. "What are you gonna do, Mama? Chase me?" Then Clara saw it. Through the diner's grimy window, a black SUV rolled into the parking lot. Slowly, deliberately. Her stomach dropped, and not from the baby's kicking.
"No, not now."
The vehicle stopped directly in front of the diner entrance. The engine cut off. For a moment, nothing happened. The bikers hadn't noticed yet, too busy rifling through her purse. Then the driver's door opened. Matteo Rossi stepped out. 6'2", broad shoulders filling out his tailored black suit, dark hair combed back, and eyes that could freeze fire. He moved like a panther, smooth, controlled, predatory. Even from inside the diner, Clara could see the shift in his posture. This wasn't the gentleman who rubbed her feet every night. This was the enforcer he used to be. "Oh shit," Clara whispered. Mateo walked through the diner door, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. The bell above the door chimed once, a death knell. His eyes found Clara first, scanning her for injuries with professional efficiency. Then they locked onto the biker holding her purse. "Put the bag down," his voice was quiet, but it carried. It always carried. Patchy Beard turned, confused. "Who the hell are?" He didn't finish. Something in Mateo's eyes registered, some primal warning that transcended words. The biker's face went pale. "I said," Mateo took 3 steps forward, closing the distance, "put the bag down." One of the other bikers, bigger than his friend and clearly dumber, decided this was a good time to play hero. He swung a wild haymaker at Mateo's head. What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Mateo caught the fist mid-swing, twisted, and there was a sharp crack that echoed through the diner. The biker screamed, dropping to his knees, his arm bent at an angle that made Clara wince. Mateo hadn't even broken stride. The other 2 bikers stumbled backward. Patchy Beard dropped the purse like it had burned him. "Out!" Mateo's voice never rose above conversational volume.
Now.
They ran. Literally ran, leaving their injured friend crawling toward the door, whimpering. Mateo watched them scramble into their motorcycles and tear out of the parking lot, spraying gravel everywhere. Only then did he turn back to Clara. He picked up her purse from the floor, checked the contents, and walked to her booth. His hands were steady as he placed it on the table, but Clara could see the rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior, in the set of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers flexed unconsciously. "You followed me again," she whispered. Mateo slid into the booth across from her, his eyes never leaving her face. "Are you hurt? Did they touch you?" "Mateo." "Answer me, Clara."
No.
"I'm fine. The baby's fine." She reached across the table, covering his clenched fist with her hand. "But you promised. You promised me this life was over." For a moment, his mask slipped. She saw the fear underneath, not for himself, but for her, for their unborn son. His other hand reached out, trembling slightly, and touched her belly. The baby kicked, and despite everything, Mateo's lips quirked into a ghost of a smile. "You're safe now," he said softly. "That's all that matters." But as Clara looked out the window at the gathering crowd, several of them holding up cell phones, recording, she knew this was just the beginning. Nothing stayed buried forever. Not in their world. The video hit social media before Clara and Mateo even made it home. Violent assault at Mel's diner. Businessman breaks man's arm. Clara saw it first on her phone as Mateo drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Someone had filmed everything, the confrontation, the broken arm, Mateo's cold, controlled violence. But the video had been edited. Cleverly. It started with Mateo grabbing the biker's fist, making it look unprovoked, making him look like the aggressor. The caption read, "Chicago businessman Mateo Rossi assaults disabled veteran at local diner. Is this who we want in our community?" Disabled veteran? Clara's voice cracked. "Those guys tried to rob me." Mateo's jaw tightened. Someone cut the footage. Professional job. By the time they pulled into the circular driveway of their estate, a modest mansion by Mafia standards, but still surrounded by wrought iron gates and security cameras, the video had 60,000 views. By dinner time, it had 500,000. Clara sat on their leather couch, her phone buzzing nonstop with messages from concerned friends who didn't know the full story. She watched the video loop again and again, each replay making her more furious. Someone had framed this perfectly to make Mateo look like a monster. Mrs. Rossi? Elena, their housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Rossi asked me to bring you tea. He said you should rest." "Where is he?" "In his office." With Mr. Rico, Elena's face was carefully neutral, but Clara caught the worry in her eyes. Rico only came around when there was trouble. Clara pushed herself off the couch, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward. "I'm going up. Mrs. Rossi," he said. I don't care what he said. She climbed the stairs slowly, her hand on the railing for support. Through Mateo's office door, she could hear voices, low, urgent, dangerous. "Already spreading to news outlets," Rico was saying. Channel 7 picked it up. "They're calling you a mobster hiding behind legitimate business." "I am hiding behind legitimate business." Mateo's voice was tired. That was the whole point. The point was to stay invisible. "This." Rico must have gestured to something. Probably the video. "This puts you back on the map. And not just you. Your whole family." Clara pushed the door open. Both men looked up. Rico, short and wiry with a scar across his cheek, had the decency to look uncomfortable. Mateo just looked defeated. "Clara, you should be resting." "Don't." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "Don't treat me like I'm fragile." "Who did this?" Rico and Mateo exchanged a glance. That was answer enough. "Victor Kane," she said flatly. It wasn't a question. Mateo nodded slowly. "We traced the original upload. It came from an IP address registered to one of his shell companies. He edited the footage, added the false caption about the veteran status, and sent it to every media outlet in Chicago." Victor Kane. The name alone made Clara's blood run cold. 5 years ago, when Mateo had walked away from the Rossi family business, it had created a power vacuum. Kane had filled it, taking over territories, corrupting politicians, running guns and drugs through the same ports Mateo's family had once controlled. The transition had been bloody. And Kane had never forgotten that Mateo chose to leave rather than fight him for control. "Why now?" Clara asked. "We've been quiet for 5 years. We haven't bothered him." Because he saw an opportunity, Rico pulled up security footage on Mateo's computer. "Look at this. Those bikers at the diner? They weren't random drunks. Watch." He played different footage, from the diner's exterior camera, time-stamped an hour before Clara arrived. The 3 bikers pulled up, but they weren't alone. A black sedan parked across the street. A man in a suit got out, spoke to them briefly, handed over what looked like cash, then drove away. "Kane sent them," Clara whispered. This was a setup. He wanted Mateo to react exactly how he did, Rico confirmed. Wanted to prove that you can't really leave this life. That the monster is still in there. "And it worked," Mateo said bitterly. He turned his computer screen toward Clara. The Chicago Tribune's website had just posted an article, "Alleged Mob Enforcer Mateo Rossi, Can a Leopard Change ITS Spots?" Clara felt the baby kick, hard, as if sensing her distress. She steadied herself against Mateo's desk. "What do we do?" "Rico wants war," Mateo said quietly. "Wants me to hit Kane's operations, make him pay. And you." Mateo stood, walking to the window. Outside, their manicured lawns stretched toward the gates. A peaceful view.
A lie.
"If I hit back, I prove him right. I become the headline. The monster. Everything I've been trying to escape. But if you don't," Rico interjected, "he'll keep pushing. This video is just the beginning, Clara. Kane wants to drag Mateo back into the mud. Make him." The doorbell rang. Aggressive. Insistent. All 3 of them froze. Then came the pounding. "Police. Open up." Rico moved to the window, peering through the curtains.
"Shit."
6 squad cars. This is a raid. Clara's heart hammered. "They can't. We haven't done anything." "The video is enough for probable cause," Mateo said, his voice hollow. "Kane probably made an anonymous tip. Said I was armed and dangerous." He turned to Clara, and for the first time since she'd known him, she saw real fear in his eyes. "You need to go upstairs. Lock the bedroom door. Don't come down no matter what you hear." "Mateo." "Please," he cupped her face in his hands. "For our son. Please." The pounding came again, harder. "This is your final warning." Rico was already moving, pulling papers from Mateo's safe, probably hiding anything incriminating. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to fight, but another sharp kick from the baby reminded her what mattered most. She nodded, tears burning her eyes. "You promised our child would never see you," as a headline. Mateo couldn't meet her gaze. Guilt and anger warred across his face. Anger at Cain, at himself, at the past he couldn't escape. "I know," he whispered. "I know." Downstairs, the front door splintered open. Police flooded in, shouting commands. Clara heard Mateo's calm voice responding, Rico's angry protests, the chaos of her carefully built, peaceful life crumbling. She climbed the stairs to their bedroom, one hand on her belly, the other clutching the railing for support. Through the window, she could see news vans already arriving. Cain had won, and this was only the beginning. The police found nothing. Of course, they found nothing. Mateo had spent 5 years making sure there was nothing to find. His import business was legitimate, boring even. Shipping manifests, tax documents, employee records, all pristine. The cops tore through his home office for 3 hours and left with empty hands and frustrated faces. But the damage was done. By midnight, every news channel in Chicago had run the story. Suspected mob boss raided after violent diner attack. The legitimate clients who'd trusted Mateo's import company started making quiet phone calls, canceling contracts, distancing themselves. Nobody wanted to do business with a man who might be connected to organized crime. Clara had watched it all from their bedroom window, her phone clutched in her hand, feeling helpless. When the police finally left and the news vans packed up for the night, she'd found Mateo in his office, sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. "I can't fix this with lawyers," he'd said quietly. Cain made sure of that. Now, at 2 a.m, Clara couldn't sleep. She stood at the top of the stairs in her bathrobe, listening to the voices drifting up from Mateo's office. He'd made calls. People had come. The same people he'd sworn he'd never talk to again. She descended slowly, her hand on the railing. The office door was cracked open, and she could see them inside. Rico, of course, and 3 others she recognized from the old days. Tommy, the wrench Marconi, who'd gotten his nickname from his weapon of choice. Sal Benedetti, the family's former accountant. And Maria Torres, a tough-as-nails woman who'd run security for the Rossi operations before Mateo walked away. "Can't let him get away with this," Tommy was saying, his voice rough. "Cain set you up, boss. We hit him back, hit him hard. Take out his drug warehouse on the south side. Send a message." "No," Mateo's voice cut through the room like a blade. "That's exactly what he wants." Clara pushed the door open fully. All heads turned. Maria was the first to stand, respectful. "Mrs. Rossi, you should be resting." "So, everyone keeps telling me." Clara moved into the room, and Mateo immediately stood, guiding her to his chair. She sat gratefully. Her back was killing her. "I want to hear this." Mateo hesitated, then nodded. He leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "Show her what you found, Sal." The accountant pulled out a tablet, his fingers flying across the screen. "We traced the original video upload through 3 proxy servers. Took some work, but we cracked it. The IP address belongs to a company called Nightshade Entertainment LLC, which is a shell company," Maria added, registered to Victor Cain. "He owns a nightclub downtown called Eclipse. That's his headquarters now, where he runs everything. So, we burn it down," Tommy said simply. "Problem solved." "And then what?" Mateo's voice was cold. "The police investigate. Fire marshals find evidence of arson. Cain tells them it was me, retaliating for the video. I go to prison, and Clara raises our son alone. That's your solution?" Tommy looked away, chastened. Rico stepped forward. "Matt, I understand what you're trying to do. You want to stay clean. But Cain crossed a line. He came after your wife, your unborn child. In the old days." "The old days are over," Mateo interrupted. "I walked away from that life for a reason. But the life didn't walk away from you." Rico's voice was urgent. "That's what Cain is proving. You can't just pretend." "I'm not pretending." Mateo's composure cracked, his voice rising. "I know what I was. I know what I did. I broke bones, Rico. I hurt people. And I promised Clara, promised my son, that I'd be better, that I'd be different. The room fell silent. Clara reached out, taking Mateo's hand. His fingers were trembling. But different doesn't mean weak, she said softly. All eyes turned to her. You're not the same man who used violence to solve problems. You're smarter now. More strategic, she looked up at him. So be smart. Be strategic. End this without becoming the monster Cain wants you to be. Mateo stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, something shifted in his expression. Clara had seen that look before. It was the look he got when solving complex logistics problems at work, when he found an elegant solution to an impossible puzzle. Blood draws more eyes, he murmured. But money? Money moves quietly. He turned to his assembled crew. What do we know about Cain's operations? Everything. I want details. Maria pulled out a folder. He runs guns through Eclipse, uses the nightclub's liquor deliveries as cover, moves about 2 million in illegal weapons monthly. His drugs come through the port, Sal added. He's bribing customs officials to look the other way. Revenue's about 5 million a month there. And his money? Mateo asked. Offshore accounts in the Caymans, Sal said. He's got maybe 30 million stashed away, all earned through shell companies that look legitimate on paper. On paper, Mateo repeated. A slow smile spread across his face, not friendly, but calculating. Dangerous. How clean are those papers, Sal? The accountant's eyes widened. You want me to? I want you to look very carefully at Mr. Cain's financial empire. And I want you to find every crack, every inconsistency, every place where his legal facade doesn't quite match up with reality. Understanding dawned on Rico's face. You're going to expose him. Better, Mateo straightened, and Clara could see the old confidence returning, but different now, channeled into something controlled. Calculated. I'm going to dismantle him.
Piece by piece.
No blood. No violence. Just good old-fashioned financial ruin and legal consequences. The cops won't touch him, Tommy protested. He's got half the department on his payroll. The cops won't, Mateo agreed. But the FBI will. The DEA will. The IRS definitely will. He looked at each of his people in turn. Cain thinks he's untouchable because he's learned to play the system. But he's gotten sloppy. Arrogant. He set me up because he thought I'd react with violence, thought I'd prove I'm still the enforcer I used to be. So we prove him wrong, Clara said. We prove him wrong, Mateo confirmed. And we do it his way with evidence, exposure, and the full weight of the law. Because that's the one thing he won't see coming. Rico was nodding slowly. It could work. If we're careful. If we're smart about it. We will be. Mateo's hand found Clara's shoulder, squeezing gently. No more headlines. No more violence. We end this quietly, and we end it permanently. Tommy still looked skeptical. And if he comes after you again while we're setting this up? Mateo's eyes went cold. Then I'll deal with that when it happens. But this ends with Cain in handcuffs, not a body bag. Are we clear? One by one, they nodded. Clara felt the baby kick, strong, insistent, and she smiled. Her son would be born into a world where his father chose justice over vengeance, strategy over violence. Maybe, just maybe, they could win this the right way. Club Eclipse pulsed with bass-heavy music and purple neon lights. It was 1 a.m. on a Friday night, and the place was packed with Chicago's young elite, trust fund kids slumming it, wannabe gangsters, and beautiful people who didn't ask questions about where the owner's money came from. Mateo Rossi walked through the front entrance alone. No backup. No weapon. Just a man in a tailored charcoal suit, hands in his pockets, moving through the crowd like he owned the place. The bouncer at the VIP section, a mountain of muscle named Deshawn, recognized him immediately. His hand went to his earpiece. Boss, we got a situation. Rossi just walked in. Through his earpiece, Victor Cain's voice came back amused. Alone.
Yeah.
Looks unarmed.
A pause.
Then, let him through. I want to see this. Deshawn stepped aside, and Mateo climbed the stairs to the second-floor VIP lounge. The music faded to a dull throb up here, replaced by the clink of expensive crystal and low conversation. Kane's private domain. Victor Kane sat on a leather throne. Literally, he'd had it custom-made, surrounded by 6 armed guards and 3 women in designer dresses who looked bored. Kane himself was younger than Mateo by a decade, mid-30s, with slicked-back blonde hair and a smile that never reached his ice-blue eyes. He wore a white suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. Matteo Rossi, Kane gestured to the guards. They moved closer, hands on their weapons but not drawing. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? Come to break some more arms? Matteo stopped 10 feet away, completely relaxed. His eyes scanned the room, counting exits, noting positions, cataloging threats, but his face remained calm. We need to talk, do we? Kane swirled his whiskey. Because from where I'm sitting, we don't need to do anything. You, on the other hand, he gestured to one of his guards, who pulled out a tablet showing news headlines. You're the one with problems. How's the business? Still have any clients left? Enough, Mateo's voice was steady. I know you sent those bikers to the diner. Do you? Kane's smile widened. Prove it. I don't need to prove it. We both know what you did. Mateo took a step forward. The guards tensed, but he ignored them entirely, his focus locked on Kane. You set up the whole thing. Paid 3 desperate junkies to harass my pregnant wife, filmed my reaction, edited it to make me look like the aggressor, and leaked it to every media outlet in the city. Kane laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. Oh, Mateo. Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, what are you going to do about it? Sue me? Call the cops. He leaned forward. You can't touch me. Because if you do, you prove you're exactly what I said you are. A violent thug pretending to be civilized. How's the little wife, by the way? Kane's tone turned mocking. Strong woman, facing down bikers alone like that. Must be exhausting, carrying your baby while you play dress up as a legitimate businessman. One of the guards shifted nervously, expecting Mateo to explode. But he didn't. He just stood there, hands still in his pockets, expression unchanged. You think this makes you powerful, Mateo said quietly. No, I know it does. Kane stood, walking closer, bold enough to get within arm's reach. His guards followed, but he waved them back slightly. I exposed you, Mateo. Reminded this city who you really are. And now they're scared again.
Of you.
Just like the old days. And that benefits you how? It shows everyone I'm the one who pulled your mask off. Kane's eyes glittered. I'm the man who proved Matteo Rossi is still dangerous. That makes me loud. It makes me relevant. The city's listening again, and they're watching to see what you'll do. Will you hit back? Will you start a war? Either way, I win. You fight me, you're a criminal. You don't fight me, you're weak. Mateo was silent for a long moment, and Clara could see something shifting in Kane's expression. Confusion at the lack of reaction, the absence of the rage he'd expected. Then Mateo stepped even closer, so close the guards moved to intervene. Kane held up a hand, stopping them. This close, Mateo towered over the younger man by several inches. You want to know the difference between us? Mateo's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, forcing Kane to lean in to hear over the distant music. You need people to fear you. You need the noise, the attention, the spectacle. Without it, you're nothing. Kane's smile faltered slightly. When they stop fearing me, Mateo continued, his voice cold and certain, I'll still own them. In ways you can't see. In ways you'll never understand. He paused, letting the words sink in. You'll just be noise. Static. Something people tune out. For just a second, a flicker, uncertainty crossed Kane's face. Mateo stepped back, adjusting his cuffs casually. Enjoy your moment, Victor. Enjoy being loud. Because loud means people are looking. And when they look close enough at you, they're going to see things you really don't want them to see. He turned and walked toward the exit. None of the guards moved to stop him. That's it. Kane called out, his voice tight. You came all this way just to make cryptic threats. Mateo paused at the doorway, glancing back over his shoulder. That wasn't a threat. Threats are what loud people make, he smiled, thin and cold. That was just me stating facts. Have a good night, Victor. He descended the stairs and disappeared into the crowd. Kane stood frozen, the whiskey glass trembling slightly in his hand. Around him, his guards exchanged confused glances. The women on the couches whispered to each other. Boss. Deshawn's voice crackled through the earpiece. Should we follow him? Make sure he leaves. Kane didn't answer immediately. He was replaying the conversation in his head, trying to figure out what he'd missed. Mateo had come unarmed, unguarded, into enemy territory, and somehow made Kane feel like he was the one at a disadvantage. Boss. Let him go, Kane said finally, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. He drained his whiskey in one gulp, but it didn't settle the unease growing in his stomach. Matteo Rossi had just walked into his club, told him he was going to lose, and walked out without a scratch. No violence. No threats. Nothing Kane could use. And somehow, that was more terrifying than any gun to his head. Outside, Matteo climbed into his SUV where Rico waited in the driver's seat. How'd it go? Rico asked. Matteo buckled his seatbelt, his expression unreadable. He's scared. He just doesn't know it yet. And now we make sure he has every reason to be. At 6 a.m. Saturday morning, while Victor Kane was still sleeping off his whiskey in a penthouse suite above Club Eclipse, Matteo's plan went into motion. Tommy the Wrench Marconi didn't use his wrench anymore. These days, he ran a legitimate trucking company that moved freight up and down the eastern seaboard, which made him perfect for what Matteo needed. Tommy's crews intercepted 3 of Kane's delivery trucks on Route 94, just outside the city limits. Not violently, nothing that would draw attention. Just a simple breakdown that required the trucks to pull over. A few friendly mechanics who happened to be passing by. Some paperwork confusion about manifests and registration. By the time Kane's drivers figured out what was happening, the trucks were already being towed to an impound lot Tommy controlled. Inside those trucks, 200 illegal firearms hidden inside crates labeled restaurant equipment, and 50 kilos of cocaine stuffed into hollowed-out furniture marked as nightclub decor. Tommy made one phone call. We got him. Clean intercept. No witnesses. Good, Matteo replied from his home office, sipping coffee while watching the sunrise. Phase 2. In a coffee shop in downtown Chicago, Sal Benedetti sat across from a woman in a crisp FBI windbreaker. Agent Rachel Morrison had been investigating organized crime in Chicago for 8 years, and she was very good at her job. Also, very frustrated that men like Victor Kane always seemed to slip through her fingers. I appreciate you meeting me, Sal said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. But I'm just a concerned citizen who stumbled across some irregularities. Morrison opened the envelope. Inside were bank statements, shipping manifests, customs declarations, and wire transfer records. Her eyes widened as she read. Where did you get this? Does it matter? Sal stood to leave. What matters is that Victor Kane has been running guns and drugs through Eclipse nightclub for 2 years. Those documents prove it. The customs officials he's bribing, the shell companies he uses to launder money, the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, it's all there. Oh. And he paused at the door. You might want to check the impound lot on Harrison Street. I heard some very interesting trucks got towed there this morning. He was gone before she could ask more questions. Morrison stared at the documents, her coffee forgotten. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. Sir, we need to mobilize a task force.
Now.
At precisely 7:30 a.m., while Kane was just waking up with a pounding headache, Maria Torres made her move. She'd spent 3 days befriending a secretary at Kane's primary bank in the Cayman Islands. The secretary, underpaid and overworked, didn't ask too many questions when Maria, posing as a financial auditor, mentioned irregularities in several accounts. Didn't question the official-looking paperwork requesting temporary freezes pending investigation of suspected money laundering. By 8 a.m., $30 million in Kane's offshore accounts were locked down tight. But Maria wasn't done. She'd also contacted the IRS with an anonymous tip about unreported income from Kane's legitimate nightclub. Included documentation showing Eclipse reported revenue of $800,000 annually while somehow affording a $3 million renovation last year. The IRS loved tips like that. Victor Kane's phone started ringing at 8:47 a.m. First call, his accountant, panicking about frozen Cayman accounts. Second call, his lawyer, warning him about an FBI investigation. Third call, his head of security at the warehouse, screaming that 3 of their delivery trucks had been seized. Kane stood in his penthouse in silk pajamas, his hangover forgotten, staring at his phone like it had turned into a snake. What the fuck is happening? By 9 a.m., he had his answer. FBI agents raided Eclipse with a warrant, swarming through the nightclub with drug-sniffing dogs and forensic accountants. They found the hidden room behind the VIP lounge, where Kane kept his records. Found the falsified shipping manifests. Found enough evidence to build a case that would take years to fight. The impounded trucks were opened. The guns and cocaine documented, photographed, tagged as evidence. Kane's phone rang again. His Cayman banker, apologetic but firm, the accounts would remain frozen pending a full audit. Money laundering investigations took time. Maybe months. Maybe years. Kane sank onto his leather couch, his empire crumbling around him in real time. His nightclub was swarming with feds. His money was locked away. His smuggling operation was blown. His bribed customs officials were already flipping to save themselves. And he'd never heard a single gunshot.
Boss.
Deshawn stood in the doorway, looking lost. What do we do? Kane didn't answer. He was remembering last night. Mateo's calm face. That cold smile. When they look close enough at you, they're going to see things you really don't want them to see. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You wanted loud. How's this working out for you? Kane threw his phone across the room, watched it shatter against the wall. But it didn't make him feel better. Nothing would make him feel better. Mateo Rossi had destroyed him without throwing a single punch. At the Rossi estate, Clara found Mateo in the kitchen making breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, fresh orange juice. The TV in the corner showed breaking news. FBI raids Chicago nightclub. Alleged mob boss Victor Kane under investigation. You did it, Clara said softly, sliding onto a bar stool. Mateo plated the eggs, added bacon, and set breakfast in front of her. I did what needed to be done. Without violence. Without violence, he confirmed. He poured her juice, then leaned against the counter. Kane built his empire on fear and corruption. All I did was shine a light on it. The system did the rest. Clara watched the news footage of Kane being let out of Eclipse in handcuffs, his expensive white suit rumpled, his face pale with shock. How long will he be in prison? With the evidence the FBI has? 20 years minimum. Maybe life. Mateo's voice was matter-of-fact. And even if he beats the charges somehow, his money's gone. His operation's blown. His people will scatter. He's finished. And us. Mateo came around the counter, kneeling beside her stool, so he was eye level. His hand found her belly, feeling their sun kick in response. We're free. No more headlines. No more threats. Kane was the last connection to my old life, and now he's gone. Clara wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe this was really over. But something in Mateo's eyes, a shadow of something he wasn't saying, made her hesitate. What is it? She asked. What aren't you telling me? Mateo was quiet for a long moment. Then, nothing. Everything's fine now. But Clara knew her husband too well. She knew when he was protecting her from something. She just didn't know what. The rest of Saturday passed in a surreal haze. Clara watched the news coverage from the living room couch, her feet propped up on pillows, a heating pad pressed against her aching back. Every channel was covering the same story. Mob boss Victor Kane arrested after financial fraud tip, faces multiple federal charges. The reporters made it sound like brilliant police work. Anonymous tips from concerned citizens. A dedicated FBI task force. The American justice system working exactly as intended. Only Clara knew the truth. Mateo had orchestrated every piece of it. The intercepted trucks, the frozen accounts, the evidence delivered to investigators. He dismantled Kane's empire like a chess master clearing the board, and he'd done it so cleanly that no one would ever know he was involved. She should have felt relieved, victorious even. Instead, she felt uneasy. Mateo had disappeared after breakfast, mumbling something about paperwork. That was 3 hours ago. Elena had brought Clara lunch, chicken soup and crackers for her unsettled stomach, but Mateo never came down. The house felt too quiet, despite the television's chatter. At 2 p.m., Clara couldn't stand it anymore. She heaved herself off the couch, one hand supporting her belly, and climbed the stairs. Her back protested with each step, and the baby seemed determined to use her ribs as a punching bag, but she pushed through. Mateo's study door was closed. Clara knocked softly. Mateo? No answer. She tried the handle, unlocked. The door swung open to reveal Mateo sitting in his leather chair, facing away from the desk. He wasn't working, wasn't on his phone. He was just
Sitting.
staring at something. Clara stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Mateo? He didn't turn around. You should be resting. So should you. She moved closer, circling around to see what he was looking at. His gun safe. It was built into the wall behind a false panel, revealed now in the afternoon light. The heavy steel door stood open, and inside Clara could see them. 3 handguns, perfectly maintained, gleaming with oil. Mateo's old tools. The weapons he'd sworn he'd never touch again. You didn't shoot anyone, Clara said quietly. Mateo's jaw tightened. Didn't need to. Feels strange, doesn't it? He finally looked at her, and Clara's heart clenched at what she saw. Not triumph or relief. Just exhaustion. A bone-deep weariness that went beyond lack of sleep. I destroyed him, Mateo said, his voice hollow. Took everything he had. His money, his freedom, his future. And I did it without firing a single shot. Without breaking a single bone. He looked back at the guns. Should feel like progress, right? Like I've changed. Clara lowered herself into the chair beside him, grateful when he immediately reached out to help her settle. But it doesn't. I keep thinking. Mateo ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in ways that would horrify his usual careful grooming. In the old days, when someone came after family, I'd handle it directly.
Fast.
Brutal. And it was over. But this? He gestured vaguely toward the window, toward the city, where Kane sat in a federal holding cell. This was calculated. Methodical. I pulled strings, manipulated systems, ruined a man's entire life in less than 12 hours. Is that really better? Or did I just find a cleaner way to destroy people? Clara was quiet for a moment, letting the weight of his question sit between them. She understood what he was asking, not whether he'd made the right tactical choice, but whether he'd truly changed, or just evolved into something more dangerous. Do you regret it? She asked. No, the answer came immediately certain. Kane set you up. Put you and our son in danger for a power play. He needed to be stopped. Then why do you look like you've lost something? Mateo's eyes returned to the gun safe, to those gleaming weapons he no longer needed. Because for 5 years I told myself I was different now. Better. That I'd left that violent man behind. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. But today proved I'm still the same person. I still know exactly how to hurt people, how to take them apart piece by piece. I just use different tools now. That's called growth, Clara said softly.
He shook his head.
Growth would be walking away, not caring about revenge, just protecting you and moving on with our lives. Mateo, Clara reached out, taking his face in both hands and forcing him to look at her. You did protect us. And yes, you also made sure Kane couldn't hurt anyone else ever again. That's not the same as revenge. That's justice. Justice, He said the word like he was tasting something foreign. The old me didn't believe in justice. Just power. The old you would have burned down his club with him inside it, Clara countered. The old you would have made it public, made it bloody, made sure everyone knew not to cross Matteo Rossi. This. She gestured toward the window again. This was strategic. Surgical. You used the system the way it's supposed to be used to stop criminals. That's not the monster talking, Matteo. That's the man I married. Matteo stared at her, and for the first time since she'd entered the room, something shifted in his expression. Not quite hope, but maybe the beginning of it. I sat here for 3 hours, he admitted, staring at those guns. Trying to remember the last time I actually needed one. And I couldn't. Can't even remember the last time I thought about them, he reached out, his hand trembling slightly as it rested on her swollen belly. The baby kicked in response, and Matteo's lips quirked into a ghost of a smile. What kind of father can I be, when I still know 100 ways to hurt people? The kind who chooses not to use them, Clara said firmly. The kind who finds better solutions. The kind who teaches his son that real strength isn't about violence, it's about choosing the harder right over the easier wrong. That's called peace, she continued, softer now. What you're feeling, that strangeness, that uncertainty, that's peace. You're allowed to feel it, Matteo. You're allowed to be uncomfortable with how unfamiliar it is. For a long moment, Matteo just sat there, his hand on her belly, feeling their son move beneath his palm. Then slowly he stood. He walked to the gun safe and stared at its contents one last time. I don't need these anymore, he said quietly. He closed the safe door, spun the combination lock, slid the false panel shut, hiding it completely. When he turned back to Clara, he looked different somehow. Still tired, probably would be for days, but lighter. Like he'd been carrying a weight he'd finally set down. Come on, he said, helping her to her feet. You need to rest, and I need to stop drowning in my own head. Clara let him guide her toward the door, but paused in the doorway. Matteo? I'm proud of you, just so you know. He kissed her forehead, gentle and warm. I don't deserve you. Probably not, she agreed with a small smile. But you're stuck with me anyway. As they left the study together, neither of them looked back at the closed gun safe. Some doors, once shut, deserved to stay that way. Sunday evening brought unseasonably warm weather to Chicago. The kind of golden autumn light that made everything look softer, kinder, like the world was holding its breath before winter arrived. Matteo drove alone, windows down, letting the breeze carry away the last 2 days of tension. Clara had fallen asleep on the couch after dinner, exhausted from the stress and the baby's constant acrobatics. He'd covered her with a blanket, left a note on the coffee table, and slipped out quietly. He needed to do this alone. Mel's highway diner looked different in the evening light. Less dingy, somehow. The faded red paint seemed warm instead of shabby, and the flickering neon sign, Mel's, with the apostrophe burned out, felt almost charming. A handful of cars sat in the parking lot. Sunday dinner crowd, probably. Families and truckers and people just passing through. Matteo parked in the same spot Clara had used 2 days ago. Sat in his SUV for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the diner entrance. The last time he'd walked through that door, he'd been someone else. The enforcer. The protector. The man who broke arms and asked questions never. He wasn't sure who he was now, but he needed to find out. The bell chimed as he entered. Conversations didn't stop this time. Nobody recognized him without the fury, without the violence that had made him memorable. He was just another customer in a decent suit, looking slightly out of place but harmless enough. Matteo scanned the room. Different waitress working the floor, younger than the one from Friday. The cook was the same, though. Big guy with tattoos covering both arms, who glanced at Matteo through the kitchen window and then quickly away. He recognized me, Matteo thought. Probably watched the whole thing. Sit anywhere you like, Han. The young waitress called out, balancing 3 plates on her arms with practiced ease. Actually, I'm looking for, Matteo paused. He didn't even know the woman's name. The waitress who'd been working Friday afternoon, who'd witnessed everything. The woman who was working Friday? Older, dark hair, about 50. The young waitress's smile faltered slightly. Doris? She's in the back. Her shift starts in 20 minutes. Could I speak with her? It's important. Something in his tone, not threatening, just sincere, made the waitress nod. Let me check. She disappeared through the kitchen door. Mateo stood by the entrance, suddenly aware of the other diners glancing at him. An older couple in a corner booth. A trucker at the counter nursing coffee. A family with 2 small children, the youngest in a high chair throwing Cheerios on the floor while his parents looked on with exhausted affection. Normal people. Normal lives. The kind of peace he was trying to build for Clara and their son. The kitchen door swung open. The waitress from Friday, Doris, apparently, emerged, wiping her hands on a dish rag. She froze when she saw him, her face going carefully neutral. The kind of neutral people wore when they were scared but trying not to show it. Mrs. Doris? Mateo kept his distance, his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. I don't want to bother you. I wanted to apologize. She glanced toward the cook, who was watching through the window, making sure she was safe. Apologize for what? Those bikers got what they deserved. Maybe. Mateo pulled out his wallet, withdrew a thick envelope he'd prepared before coming. But I broke a man's arm in your restaurant. Scared your customers. Probably cost you business. He held out the envelope. This is for the damages. The broken table, the chair that got kicked over, and some extra for your trouble. Doris didn't take it immediately. She studied his face, looking for the violence from Friday, the cold fury that had filled the room. Whatever she saw now must have been different, because she slowly reached out and accepted the envelope. She opened it, her eyes widening. This is $3,000. The table was maybe 200, Mateo said. The rest is for you and your staff. For having to clean up after my mess. And he paused, choosing his words carefully. For your silence. And your safety. My safety. The man I hurt, his boss was arrested yesterday. You probably saw it on the news. Victor Kane. Mateo watched understanding dawn on her face. He won't bother you. Won't bother anyone here. But if anyone asks what happened Friday, if police or reporters come around asking questions, he met her eyes directly. You tell them the truth. That 3 men harassed a pregnant woman, and her husband intervened. That's all it was. Self-defense. Doris clutched the envelope, her hands shaking slightly. That is all it was. Good, Mateo nodded. Then we understand each other. He turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. Your wife. The pregnant lady. Is she okay? Something in Mateo's chest loosened. She's fine. Baby's fine. Due in a month. Boy or girl?
Boy.
Doris smiled, genuine this time, the fear fading from her expression. Congratulations.
And
thank you. For the money. You didn't have to do that. Yes, Mateo said quietly. I did. He left before she could respond, the bell chiming his departure. Outside, the sunset had painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the kind of beautiful evening that made you forget the world could be harsh. Mateo stood in the parking lot for a moment, breathing in the cool air, letting the peace of the evening settle into his bones. This was closure. This was making things right in the small ways he could control. Mommy, look. Pretty clouds. A little boy's voice pulled Mateo's attention. A woman walked past the diner toward the parking lot, holding the hand of a child who couldn't have been more than 4. The boy pointed at the sunset with his free hand, his face lit up with wonder at something as simple as colored clouds. The mother smiled down at him with tired, infinite love. Beautiful, baby. Now, come on. We need to get home for dinner. Can we have dinosaur nuggets? If you're good. They climbed into a beat-up Toyota, the boy chattering about dinosaurs and clouds and something that happened at preschool. Simple concerns. Simple joys. The life Mateo wanted for his own son. The Toyota drove away, leaving Mateo standing alone in the golden light. He looked up at the sunset, his hand unconsciously moving to his chest, pressing against his heart. For 5 years, he'd carried the weight of his past there. Every bone he'd broken, every threat he'd made, every life he'd ruined. That weight had felt permanent, like an anchor he could never lift. But standing here now in the evening quiet, he felt something shift. Not gone. The past never truly disappeared. But lighter, manageable, the kind of weight you could carry without it crushing you. I can do this, he whispered to the sunset, to himself, to the sun who would be born in a month. I can be better. The sky deepened to purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. Mateo climbed into his SUV, started the engine, and drove home to his wife. To his future. To the life he'd chosen over the one he'd left behind. Mateo arrived home just as the last light faded from the sky. The house glowed warm against the deepening darkness, windows lit like promises of safety and peace. He could see Clara through the living room window, moving slowly around the couch, and his chest tightened with something he was finally learning to recognize as contentment. He found her folding baby clothes. The living room coffee table was covered with tiny outfits, onesies with dinosaurs, little pants with elastic waistbands, impossibly small socks that looked like doll accessories. Clara sat on the couch, her pregnant belly making the simple task awkward, carefully smoothing each piece before folding it with methodical precision. "You're supposed to be resting," Mateo said from the doorway. Clara looked up, relief flooding her face. "You left without saying goodbye. You were sleeping. Didn't want to wake you." He crossed the room, settling onto the couch beside her. "What's all this?" "Nesting, apparently. It's a thing pregnant women do." She held up a blue onesie covered in smiling whales. "I've washed everything 3 times. Elena thinks I'm insane." "Elena thinks everyone's insane." Mateo picked up a tiny jacket, marveling at how small it was. In a month, maybe less, there would be a person small enough to wear this. His son. "Where'd you go?" He should have expected the question. Clara never let anything slide. "Back to the diner," he admitted. "Paid for the damages. Apologized to the waitress." Clara set down the onesie she was folding, her full attention on him now. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." Mateo put down the jacket, his fingers tracing the soft fabric. "That place, those people, they got caught in the middle of something that had nothing to do with them. I needed to make it right. Or as right as I could make it." "And did you? Make it right?" "I think so." He looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd seen him at his worst and somehow still believed in who he could become. "I gave her money for the damages and for her silence. Not threats, just compensation."
For the trouble I caused.
"And when I left, I didn't feel like I was running from something anymore. I felt like I was choosing something. Does that make sense?" Clara's eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. "Perfect sense." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, Clara folding, Mateo watching. The house settled around them with familiar creaks and sighs. Outside, a car passed, its headlights briefly illuminating the room before fading back to darkness. "What happens now?" Clara asked softly. "Kane's in prison. The threat's gone. Your past is locked away. What comes next for us?" Mateo shifted, sliding off the couch to kneel beside her. His hand found her belly, pressing gently, and their son responded with a strong kick that made them both smile. "This," Mateo said, his voice thick with emotion. "This is what comes next. You, me, him. A normal life. The kind where the biggest crisis is dinosaur nuggets versus chicken fingers." "You sure you can handle that kind of excitement?" Clara teased, but her hand covered his on her belly. "I can't erase who I was," Mateo said, meeting her eyes with complete honesty. "I can't pretend I didn't break bones and ruin lives. Can't pretend I wasn't good at it. That version of me will always be part of my history." He paused, feeling his son kick again beneath his palm. "But I can decide who he'll remember me as. Not the enforcer. Not the monster. Just his father." Someone who chose to be better. Clara's tears finally fell, sliding down her cheeks as she smiled. Then let him remember you like this. Right here, right now. The man who kneeled beside me and promised to be better. The man who chose peace over violence, justice over revenge. That's the father I want him to know. Mateo leaned forward, kissing her forehead, then her belly. I love you both so much it terrifies me. Good, Clara whispered. That's how you know it's real. They stayed like that for a long moment, Mateo kneeling, Clara's hands in his hair, their son moving between them, oblivious to the weight of the promises being made. Finally, Mateo stood. There's something I need to do. He went upstairs to his study, Clara following slowly behind. She watched from the doorway as he opened the false panel, revealing the gun safe one last time. The combination spun easily under his fingers. He'd opened this safe 1,000 times in his old life. The guns gleamed inside, pristine and deadly. Mateo stared at them for a long moment, remembering who he'd been when these weapons felt necessary. When violence was the first solution, not the last resort. Then he closed the safe door firmly, spun the combination to lock it, and for good measure, he pulled out a screwdriver from his desk drawer and removed the false panel entirely, tossing it into the closet where it would gather dust. There, he said, turning to Clara. No more easy access. If I ever need to open that safe, I'll have to work for it. Give myself time to think about whether it's really necessary. Clara smiled through her tears. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of us. Mateo helped her back downstairs, back to the living room full of baby clothes and the promise of a new beginning. As they settled onto the couch together, Clara's head on his shoulder, his hand on her belly, Mateo felt something he'd been chasing for 5 years finally click into place.
Peace.
Real peace. Not the absence of danger, but the presence of choice. The knowledge that he could face threats without becoming a threat himself. That strength wasn't in the fear you created. It was in what you could stop yourself from destroying. In what you chose to protect instead. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, the Rossi family prepared for their future. A future built not on violence or fear, but on love, second chances, and the quiet courage it took to choose peace every single day. Mateo looked down at Clara, at the baby clothes scattered around them, at the life they were building together. We're going to be okay, he whispered. Clara squeezed his hand. We already are. And for the first time in his life, Mateo Rossi believed it.